Hello, everyone. It is Kevin Marley, your friendly neighborhood real estate agent. And today I wanted to talk about the recent announcement about sellers having the option to not use traditional blind bidding in the process when it comes to selling their home when it happens to be with a multiple offer situation. So this announcement comes after there's been a lot of pressure on Canada to cool the housing market, which has gone up crazy since COVID hit. And it really did start before COVID, but it was a catalyst to really ramp up the situation. So I wanted to kind of talk about this new announcement. I don't want to really talk about what else is causing it too much, but we're going to get into some of that today. Okay, so first, blind bidding, what is it? Well, like the name implies, all the people wishing to purchase the property submit a bid and are blind to the other bids, meaning they don't know what the other bids have in terms of their conditions. They don't know how much money the other people are offering. Nothing is known to them other than the comparables of the area and whatever else their realtor can advise them on. So this means that you could have a bunch of bids very close together, which essentially would show that that is probably a good value for the house, since a lot of people are in agreement when it comes to that valuation. And that is always a good sign. However, you might get a situation in which one or a handful of offers are just way higher than the other. And then it's pretty much no-brainer for the seller on their decision. They don't have to go with the higher offer. This is something that we've talked about before, and maybe I'll do another video on, but they don't have to. It's just more often than not they will, because that is what is most attractive to them when it comes to selling their house, is more money. And so this process has come under some scrutiny because people feel that someone incorrectly puts in a much higher price, and then this does drive up the values of all the properties in the area. And this is because that new sale price has become a comparable. And so when a real estate agent is going to be doing a deep dive into an area to help their buyers better prepare for what the property is going to go for, you're going to see this recent sale and you're going to say, okay, this is the most recent sale and it's this high. So now we're the prices are climbing up, and this is now what we're kind of going to be expecting going forward, even though that was just one offer out of potentially tens or up into the 20s I've seen. Maybe one or two offers was up at that level, but the rest were down at a more normal, realistic valuation. So people are not happy with that, and they want a little bit more transparency when it comes to that situation. So the problem is the transparency won't always solve the issue, right? So if you have someone who just has a lot of money backing them and they really want that property, an open auction situation where everyone knows the offers at all times, that's not really going to solve your first-time homebuyer issue potentially, because you're going to run into someone who has a lot more funds than you do, and you'll get into a situation where you guys keep one-upping each other, and eventually you run out of money and they get the property anyway. So we haven't really solved the problem for buyers struggling to get homes by removing the blind bidding, which again, it's not even a ban on it. It is just a simple allowance for a seller to go this route. And, I really don't think they're going to see too many of them. We might see a few. I'll give you one scenario. So if you put your home on the market and you've priced it reasonably, but you're still expecting a number of offers to come in, and you're hoping, as a seller, you're hoping someone comes in and gives you that huge tens or even $100,000 over asking, right? And that's what you're really looking for, but you don't get it. So you get 5 or 6 offers, they come in, but no one has gone above and beyond, right? In that situation, if they're all pretty close, maybe you do open it up and say, here are the offers for everyone, and you kind of hope that you can get 2 or 3 people just one-upping each other just to drive it up a little bit higher. Traditionally, what would happen is if there were a large number of offers, you might have 2 or maybe 3 rounds of offers. And the way this would work is something like this. You'd have, so let's say 10 offers. You would take the next highest 3 of the 10. So 7 would be removed. You would say, thank you for your offer, but we've chosen to narrow the pool down to get more communication with these other offers. So you drop 7. Those people are way too low where they had conditions in that didn't make sense. We'll touch into conditions a little bit in a second, but for right now, let's stick with price. So you drop the 7 off, you get 3 left, and you'll go back to those 3, and you'll say you guys have been the front runners, so it's down to 3. And if you can now attempt to improve your offer. Now, I have always advised my buyers in this market, always go in at your best. No guarantee you have this option. So if you were one of those other 7 and you were holding back, you just missed out because you were expecting to get into that selective pool of the next round of 3 offers. You held off and it failed. You backfired because now you're out. You are now back out to square one. You're looking for a home again. So I always say go in with your best. And then when it comes to this part of it, you really can't up yours anymore. And your hope is that the other sides can't either. But unfortunately, usually someone near the top does have more funds. They were just hoping to get it for this, but they're able and willing to go much higher. And so this is where the blind bidding that isn't really impacting it as much as people think, because if this was an open auction situation, the same problem would happen. You would have a number of offers and they would come in at their best and they would not be able to keep going one up. And so you might be able to go up and up and up, but then you meet someone else who's already like, okay, I was hoping to get it for this, but I'm going to keep one upping you because I know I have more funds than you do. You're a first time home buyer and I'm an experienced investor that has a bunch of homes and I've got a whole bunch of capital ready to go. So that's the problem really with the market, not the transparency. Although I do agree transparency is a big issue, and it's one that I think a lot of realtors are potentially on the hook for here, that we have not been great at handling this situation and explaining the process and also being knowledgeable about the area. So part of the problem also, and this is I think the part that people focus on, but it's not the whole pie, and that is an agent that's helping a buyer out that has some funds and they're looking in an area that they can't afford. If their agent is not knowledgeable about the recent homes being sold, about the history of the area, about how one block might differ from another, you could run into a situation where an agent is now advising their client to, because it's blind, because this is in the past, because it's been blind, advising their client to go in at a certain price point. And that price point may not have been required to get the property. It may have been way too high. And that sale now justifies the next sale price, and then boom, these prices keep climbing, right? Because you continue to have these buyers come in that have agents that are maybe not as knowledgeable in the area, and they're going to keep going even higher thinking that's just what it is, and they won't have that knowledge that a local agent might have. That's a problem. That is straight up a problem. You'll run into that same problem ish in an open auction. The only difference is you'll be able to see what the other bids are, and that will help you kind of gauge and say, whoa, okay, we're about to buy this house and all these other offers are at 500,000. We were thinking 6, so we don't have to go as high. So it will protect some buyers in that regard. But that is, in this particular market, that is not really the driving factor behind these, especially if you're working with a knowledgeable agent. They're going to be upfront with you and tell you that, this property, this is what we're expecting. And if it goes more than that, it's you're overpaying. Now some people are okay overpaying, and this is part of the problem. The fact that they're okay overpaying shows and suggests that it's more of a speculation in the asset of property ownership than it really is about the short-term overpayment of a home. And that's probably where a lot more of the attention needs to focus, and that's probably a lot more of an impact on what's driving up these properties. So I just wanted to quickly kind of touch on that. We're not going to get too bogged down on that. I want to kind of get back to the whole auction stuff. The other big problem right now with the blind auction, and one that potentially could get solved a little bit with a more open auction style, although I think there's probably room for the government to step in and maybe regulate this a little bit more, and that is with the conditions. So right now, almost all multiple offer situations, the only real offers in consideration are ones in which they have removed, so the buyer submits the offer, they're ones in which they have removed all of the protections that would normally be given to the buyer, which are found in your standard agreement, but at the very end, and you can just add or subtract whatever you want, and the offers that are considered are the ones that have removed all protections to the buyer, including financing, which is insane, right? Because essentially you have to go, and the banks aren't giving you a definitive answer until they have checked the property out for themselves. And so you are forced as a buyer right now to go in, buy a house, and just trust the bank will agree on the value and that everything is good to go. And this is the scariest part for buyers, and it's the scariest part for me as an agent too, because I hate doing this, because the buyers are on the hook for that offer regardless of if the bank says yes or no. Like, if the bank says no, you run into a whole host of problems there, because now you've got buyers that have legally bought a property they can't afford, and get, like, lawyers need to get involved there, so that it's a horrible situation. And this is one in which, unless you have been removing that condition from your offer, you are not being considered by the seller. It's just not happening. And so this is an area in which I think potentially you do get a little bit of help with the open auctions setup, but even that this is one way in which buyers are able to leverage their position to increase their odds of being accepted, even without increasing the money. So essentially, if you don't have any more money, you just take on a lot more risk. And that's really hard for first-time homebuyers to understand what is going on and why they have to take on all this extra risk as well. And so that is an area that I also think is one that really needs to be looked at, and maybe we'll do another deep dive on that or something like that in the future. But again, the open auction won't always solve that. Essentially what you'll get is you'll get one person increasing their price, and you'll get another person basically increasing the value of their offer by taking on more risk, by basically waiving all of the protections afforded to the buyer. And so the open auction is not going, I mean, you're still in an auction situation, right? You're still competing with each other for these properties. And if you have the money, and if you are willing to take on the risk, you're able to get the property. But that's the crux of the issue here, is that it is really scary to be a first-time home buyer and not have the experience or the capital to help you out of these jams. There's a whole bunch of other things that they're talking about in terms of banning foreign investors, but that's a small percentage of the homes being sold. You got the somewhat of a ban or a higher tax on flipping and that kind of stuff, and on multiple property purchases. But again, when it comes down to it, an investor is going to weigh those additional costs with the perceived future value of the property. And so right now the calculation that they're doing is to see whether or not these higher interest rates combined with the additional taxes that they're going to have to pay in order to buy the property as a real estate investor, is it worth it in the long run, because the property is going to go up so much in value. And that's really, I think, the crux of the issue, and we'll get to that at some point in terms of housing being a speculative asset that has really captured people's minds more as an investment and that rather than as a place to live. So yeah, we'll talk about other solutions to that at a later date. I wanted to quickly jump on and talk about the blind bidding versus open auction style, because so many people have asked me about this and what I think, and is this going to solve the problem? I don't think it's going to solve the problem, but what I will say is I do think it will make people feel better about the prices that they're paying when they pay whatever for a property. I think the transparency is the issue, and a big part of the problem is that there are other factors, not just price, not just condition, but even if you have the highest price and the least amount of conditions protecting buyers, you still might lose out to someone else with no reasons why. Because if you're very close, or you know, it doesn't even matter if you're close, you could have a way higher offer. The seller still has the right to choose whoever they want. It doesn't matter. They don't have to tell you why. You can ask. Maybe they'll be kind and tell you. Maybe it's a family friend or whatever. You don't know. So at the end of the day, like, all of this kind of stuff is probably where I think a lot of confusion lies. When people talk about transparency, I've had a number of times where we've lost out being either the high or close to it to a much lower offer. And all of a sudden I get buyers that are super confused about, like, what are we supposed to do? We did everything right. And I go, yes, you did. But the seller has the right to sell to whomever they want for whatever price. And they chose those other people either because they know them or because the other people had a dog and they have a dog or whatever. Like, it's whatever the seller wants as their reason, or whatever is in their mind. That's the reason. And it's all that kind of stuff that I think is also plaguing people's minds about transparency in terms of, like, why are my offers not getting accepted? And a big part of the problem is that the way the transaction process works, I, as a buyer agent that lost out on an offer, I won't know the final price potentially for a week, depending on the conditions and if they got their deposit handed in on time, all these other factors. And so there's sometimes a gap in, we've put an offer in, we've lost, and now we're waiting several days to figure out what happened. And then when that price comes, it's kind of strange. It's either super low or super high, and it's like, what happened? And it's this entire situation and just the build up to it that I think has got people really confused and flustered. And I think agents have not done a great job explaining the process and explaining the expectations going in to a multiple offer, particularly a multiple offer that has a large number of offers. So it's one thing to be going in initially to a 3-offer situation, right? Because we talked about at this onset, you've got maybe 10 offers and then you narrow it down to 3. If you go in at 3, it is much more palatable to the buyer, and it's more understandable about what's going on, because you now have 3 offers, and it might not be the highest one that you pick, but you can kind of then figure out, oh, this one had less conditions, or this one, they knew these people, or these people were able to show that they had the financing by having a larger deposit. All these other aspects that are kind of left out of the narrative. But in a 3-offer situation, it's much easier to figure out where you were positioned in those offers. But when you're getting into 10s or 20 offers, you don't know where you sit. And it's in those situations that it's just it's almost impossible from the agent's perspective to try to explain where we were. All you can do as a realtor is to be confident in your in your background checks that you've done on the property and in your research, and be confident in the pricing that you've provided to your buyers, and that's what you've got to kind of hang your hat on. But buyers want to know, and I don't blame them. I completely understand. I mean, heck, in those situations I want to know too, but I also understand just from being in this business that you sometimes don't know, and you sometimes won't know. There will be times where you will never know why you didn't get a house, and there's no transparency regulations that are being talked about that will address that. But I will say, I think I can understand why buyers want to see this happen, and I don't think it will I don't think it will be as big of an impact as other people think it will be. But at the same time, sellers are going to be upset about this because they will lose out on that chance to have someone come in and go way higher. And that's essentially what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about right now there is a chance when you go to sell your house that someone comes in who is either really in love with your property and will get it at whatever the cost, and they have endless funds. And that's the hope, right? Everyone wants that kind of buyer. There's a chance that happens in the blind bidding process. But when you open it up, that person that is in love with your property, they're still in love with the property, but now they can see the other offers and the ballpark where they're at, and they can just keep one-upping the other offers. And so they will eventually get it, and good for them. They were in love with it, and they had the resources to do it, but they will not be paying hundreds of thousands more than what the other offers were because they were able to see it. So this is where the issue is on the seller side. They don't want to give up that chance, even though it's not always a great chance depending on your property and your area. But there's always that chance that someone's going to come in and go way higher. And that's essentially what the battle comes down to. It comes down to the transparency and ease of mind of the buyers versus the opportunity for sellers to basically hit a jackpot, hit a lottery, like just get lucky in this real estate market and get someone so excited about their home, they must have it, and they're willing to pay crazy amounts for it. Now, this kind of could slow down the market a little bit, but all it would do is just slow down the giant jumps we have from catalysts such as COVID. It wouldn't actually slow down the market in terms of pricing, because you would still have potentially other investors or other people with a large number of funds behind them one-upping each other. So you still are going to have increases. They just might not be as big a jumps as we're used to seeing. And so, again, I don't think that this is where we need to focus our attention when it comes to trying to fix this market and help people get into homes. But I will say I completely understand the transparency issue. It's one of the reasons I got into this business. This is such a scary time for buyers, particularly first-time home buyers who have never gone through this process, and they have a bunch of people who may have not gone through this process in years or decades, like their parents explaining to them the process, but their parents have no idea what's going on now because their parents haven't tried to sell or buy a property in 10, 20 years. And so you get a whole bunch of confusion for these first-time home buyers, combined with potentially a lack of understanding and expertise from the realtor themselves in that area, combined with a very confusing process that is different almost every time I go into it. And so each time it's really hard to get my buyers to understand and get the expectations to where I think they need to be when it comes to putting offers in. And this entire process is just weighing over top of them. And it's why a recent study came out saying that 63% of people people who don't own homes have basically given up ever owning a home because of this crazy process. And so we've got to fix that. Those people need to have some hope and have some way of purchasing a home. And it starts with transparency. So there has to be something that gives a little bit. And unfortunately, right now, all we're doing here is kind of skirting the line. I think we need to really step up as realtors and do what's right for our clients, and be a lot more honest and open about how this whole thing works. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I would love to talk to each and every one of you. If you have something that you want me to look at personally, you can do it in a private message. Otherwise, put them in the comments. And if there's a lot of comments about a particular topic, I'd love to do another video on that. But anyway, that's it for this one. Hopefully the market is going to be a little bit more normal is maybe the word I would choose, at least pre-COVID normal. And right now we're seeing some interesting things. I'm going to have some stats coming out for you guys in a couple days. There's just a lot going on in the world of real estate, from mortgage rate increases to the relaxation of COVID, meaning that more people are willing to put their home on the market. So we have more properties available. We still have a huge buyer pool, and we have all these other issues that we've talked about in the video today. But but we'll see how things turn out in the future. Until then, where is it? Go Leafs go, and I'll see you on the next one.